The chandelier's crystalline light caught every facet of the moment. The polished shoes of Nobel laureates, the silk gowns of venture capitalists, the confident smirks of men who'd never been told no. And there, in the center aisle of the World Quantum Summit's grand ballroom, Zaria Valoris pushed her mop across marble floors worth more than her entire year's salary, invisible until Kale Tanaka's finger turned her into a spectacle. Perhaps our janitor would like to solve what we cannot. His voice boomed through the microphone, dripping with theatrical cruelty, and 2,000 of the world's brightest minds laughed as if he'd told the joke of the century. Welcome back, my beautiful family. Before we begin, please click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's get into the story. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced the darkness at 4 a.m, but Zaria Valoris had been awake for the past 20 minutes, staring at the water-stained ceiling of her studio apartment in South Boston. Sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford, not when her mind refused to stop racing through quantum probability matrices and multidimensional decoherence patterns. She reached over and silenced the alarm before it could wake her mother in the adjacent room, separated only by a curtain Zaria had hung 2 years ago when privacy became a bitter joke. The apartment was a study in contradictions. Cleaning supplies, industrial-grade mops, bottles of disinfectant, spare uniform shirts occupied the corner near the door, the tools of her visible life. But the walls told a different story. White bars covered every available surface, filled with equations that would make most PhD candidates weep. Schrodinger's wave functions danced alongside Heisenberg's uncertainty principles. Complex matrices sprawled across the space above her futon, modified and refined versions of theories that consumed 3 years of her stolen nights. Zaria moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency. She brewed coffee in a pot that had seen better decades, the kind of burnt, bitter fuel that kept her conscious through 16-hour days. While it percolated, she stood before her largest whiteboard, the one that held her masterwork, a revolutionary approach to quantum stability that she'd been developing in secret, piece by painstaking piece. The world saw quantum decoherence as an isolation problem. Keep the quantum bits separate, minimize interaction, preserve the fragile state. But Zaria had taken a different path, one born from desperation and late nights in public libraries after her janitorial shifts. What if, instead of preventing decoherence, you could actively manage it? A multidimensional matrix that corrected quantum state, decay in real time, like a conductor orchestrating chaos into symphony. It was radical. It was controversial. It was, she believed with every fiber of her being, correct. Baby, you up already? Her mother's voice drifted through the curtain, weak but warm. Zaria quickly erased a section of her calculations. Old habit, protecting her work even from the person she trusted most. Just getting ready for work. Mama, you need anything? Iloan Valoris emerged from behind the curtain, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose nervous system was betraying her one synapse at a time. She'd been a dancer once, her daughter's first teacher in the language of grace and determination. Now, at 53, she looked 70, her body ravaged by a rare neurological disease with a name Zaria had learned to hate, progressive multisystem neurodegeneration. The kind of condition that came with experimental treatments, astronomical bills, and a countdown clock nobody wanted to acknowledge. I can make you breakfast, Zaria offered, already moving toward her kitchenette. Honey, you do too much already. Iloan settled into the worn armchair that served as her throne, her sanctuary, her prison. You should be at MIT right now, finishing your doctorate, changing the world. The familiar ache bloomed in Zaria's chest, the ghost of the life she'd abandoned. She'd been 24, 6 months from defending her dissertation, when her mother's diagnosis had arrived like a meteor strike. The choice hadn't really been a choice at all. Stay and complete her degree while her mother's treatments went unfunded, or leave and become whatever she needed to be to keep her mother alive. She'd chosen love. She'd chosen survival. She'd chosen the mop and bucket over the laboratory. I am changing the world, Zaria said, forcing brightness into her voice as she scrambled eggs. One clean floor at a time. Iloan's laugh turned into a cough, and Zarya was there in seconds, steadying her, waiting for the spasm to pass. These moments were getting more frequent. The current treatment protocol was losing its effectiveness, and the next tier, the one that might buy them another 2 years, cost more than Zarya made in 3 years of janitorial work. The summit's today, isn't it? Eloan asked when she caught her breath. The big quantum conference? Zarya nodded, setting the plate of eggs in front of her mother. World Quantum Summit. Biggest minds in the field, all in one place. She tried to keep the longing from her voice and failed miserably. You should be presenting there, not cleaning there. Maybe in another life. Zarya kissed her mother's forehead, tasting the salt of struggle. I need to catch the bus. Your medications are on the counter, labeled by time. Mrs. Chun from downstairs will check on you at lunch. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. I love you, brilliant girl. Love you more, Mama. The morning bus was packed with the city's invisible workforce, housekeepers, security guards, kitchen staff, the people who made Boston's gleaming towers function while remaining carefully unseen. Zarya claimed a seat near the back and pulled out her battered tablet. The screen cracked but functional. She downloaded 73 research papers on quantum computing overnight, pirated from academic databases she technically no longer had access to. She was deep into a fascinating paper on quantum error correction when the bus lurched to a stop outside the Boston Convention Center. The building rose before her like a glass cathedral to human achievement, and somewhere inside, the quantum elite were gathering to discuss problems Zarya had been solving in her head for months. The staff entrance was around back, naturally. Zarya swiped her ID badge and entered the fluorescent-lit corridors, with a magic happen away from public eyes. Her supervisor, a tired man named Gerald who'd stopped learning names years ago, handed her an assignment sheet without looking up from his clipboard. Main ballroom needs setup. Summit starts at 9. Stay invisible, stay quiet, and for God's sake, don't touch anything expensive. Yes, sir. Zarya had perfected the art of visible invisibility. Present enough to do her job, invisible enough to be ignored. The ballroom was a monument to excess. Crystal chandeliers worth more than her mother's entire course of treatment hung from ceilings painted with classical frescoes. The stage bristled with technology, massive screens, holographic projectors, a podium embedded with controls that could summon any data in microseconds. Chairs for 2,000 attendees formed perfect rows, each seat claimed by a mind that had shaped the modern world. Zarya moved through the space with her cart, dusting, adjusting, preparing, but her eyes kept drifting to the presentation materials being loaded onto the stage servers. Quantum decoherence, the impossible problem, the Everest of their field. She recognized the names on the speaker roster. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the legendary physicist who died 5 years ago, his legacy now managed by his son, Dr. Consuelo Martinez, who'd won the Nobel for her work on quantum entanglement, Dr. James Rothschild, whose textbook had been Zarya's Bible during her MIT years, and Kale Tanaka, CEO of Tanaka Corporation, the wunderkind who'd inherited his father's company and his genius. Or so the headlines claimed. Zarya had read about him in Forbes, in Wired, in every tech publication that mattered. 32 years old, billionaire, impossibly handsome if you believe the photos, and possessed of an ego that could be seen from orbit. The attendees began filtering in around 8:30. Zarya faded into the background, just another staff member in a gray uniform, beneath notice. She watched them network, these titans of science and industry, their conversations peppered with jargon she understood better than they knew. They spoke of quantum computing's future, of the fortunes waiting for whoever could solve the stability problem, of the decoherence equation that had stumped the field for a decade. If they only knew that the solution was standing 15 feet away, holding a dust cloth. The lights dimmed at precisely 9 o'clock. Dr. Martinez took the stage first, delivering a presentation on quantum encryption that was technically flawless but philosophically limited. Zarya watched from the side aisle, her hands busy with a completely unnecessary task, polishing the brass rail, while her mind cataloged the weaknesses in Martinez's approach. Then Kale Tanaka strode onto the stage, and the energy in the room shifted. He was taller than she'd expected, moving with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never been told he didn't belong anywhere. His suit was custom, probably Italian, cut to emphasize a frame that suggested he spent as much time in the gym as in boardrooms. But it was his face that captured attention. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that broadcast charm and danger in equal measure. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice rich and commanding, "we're going to talk about failure." A ripple of surprised laughter moved through the audience. For 10 years, the greatest minds in quantum physics have failed to solve the decoherence equation. My father failed. Dr. Martinez failed. Dr. Rothschild failed. He paused, his smile sharpening. "I've failed. We've thrown billions of dollars, millions of hours, and countless reputations at this problem, and it remains unsolved. Quantum computers still can't maintain coherence long enough to perform truly revolutionary calculations. We're building Ferraris that fall apart after driving 3 feet." He clicked a remote, and the screens behind him filled with the equation. Zarya's breath caught. She knew every variable, every operator, every implication of that mathematical poetry. The decoherence problem is why quantum computing remains a promise instead of revolution. Cale continued. It's why we're not curing diseases, cracking encryption, or modeling climate change with the precision we need. This equation represents the boundary of human achievement, the wall we cannot climb. Zarya found herself drifting closer, drawn by the magnetic pull of her life's work being discussed on the world's biggest stage. She was mopping now, cleaning a spill that didn't exist, positioning herself where she could see the equation more clearly. To knock a corporation is offering a prize, Cale announced, and the room went silent. $800 million to anyone who can solve this equation. Not theoretically, practically. A solution that works, that can be implemented, that will finally unlock quantum computing's full potential. The ballroom erupted in excited chatter. $800 million. It was an absurd sum, a fortune that could change lives, fund research for generations, buy her mother every treatment known to medicine, and invent a few new ones. Zarya's hands tightened on the mop handle. "Of course," Cale said, his voice cutting through the noise. "We all know it's impossible. The greatest minds in this room have tried and failed. So really this prize is just—" His eyes swept the audience and landed, inexplicably, on Zarya. She froze, mop in hand, suddenly visible in a way that made her skin prickle with warning. The smile that crossed Cale's face was not kind. "Perhaps our janitor would like to give it a try," he said into the microphone, his voice amplified and amused. "After all, if the world's leading physicists can't solve it, maybe we need a fresh perspective. What do you say? $800 million for solving the impossible." The laughter started as a trickle and became a wave. 2,000 brilliant minds, laughing at the absurdity, at the joke, at her. Zarya felt the heat rise in her cheeks, the familiar burn of humiliation that she'd experienced 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. Every time someone assumed the janitor couldn't understand the conversation happening around her, every time someone spoke slower or louder, as if her uniform indicated cognitive impairment. But underneath the shame, something else stirred, something cold and hard and sharp as diamond. Cale was still smiling, basking in the laughter he generated, already turning back to his presentation, as if she'd been nothing more than a comedic prop. Zarya Valoris made a decision that would change everything. She parked her mop bucket with deliberate care, straightened her gray uniform with steady hands, and walked down the aisle toward the stage with a purpose that gradually silenced the laughter around her. By the time she reached the stairs, the ballroom had gone quiet enough to hear the whisper of her footsteps on the carpet. Cale turned, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion as she climbed the stage steps. "I'm sorry, the staff entrance is," he began. Zarya took the microphone from his hand. He was too surprised to resist. She looked out at 2,000 faces, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time, not as the brilliant minds she'd idolized, but as people. Flawed, limited, human, just like her, just like everyone. "My name is Zarya Valoris," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "I was the top student in MIT's quantum dynamics program before I had to leave to care for my mother. For the past 3 years, I've been developing a solution to the decoherence equation, not in a laboratory, not with billion-dollar equipment, but in my apartment and in public libraries, using computational power I begged, borrowed, and occasionally stole. The silence was absolute now. Cale's face had gone pale. "Your approach is wrong," she continued, addressing not Cale but the entire room. "You're all trying to prevent decoherence through isolation. But quantum states don't want to be isolated. They want to interact. That's their nature. My solution doesn't fight that nature. It manages it. A multidimensional correction matrix that maintains coherence by actively compensating for environmental interaction in real time." She could see understanding dawning on some faces, skepticism on others. Dr. Martinez was leaning forward, her eyes sharp with sudden interest. Zarya turned to Cale, meeting his gaze directly. "So yes, Mr. Tanaka, I accept your challenge. I'll solve your impossible equation. And when I do, I'll take every single dollar of that $800 million. She handed him back the microphone and walked off the stage, leaving absolute chaos in her wake. The chaos erupted before Zarya reached the ballroom doors. Voices cascaded over each other. Shocked gasps, incredulous laughter, the sharp bark of questions from journalists who smelled blood in the water. Camera flashes exploded like supernovas, and Zarya kept her head down, moving to the crowd with the same invisible efficiency that had protected her for 3 years. "Miss Valoris! Miss Valoris!" A reporter blocked her path, microphone thrust forward like a weapon. "Do you really think you can solve an equation that stumped Nobel laureates? Can you comment on your MIT background? Is this a publicity stunt? How does it feel to humiliate a billionaire?" Zarya pushed through without responding, her heart hammering against her ribs. What had she done? The moment felt surreal, like watching yourself in a movie where a protagonist makes a bold, reckless decision that will either end in triumph or complete disaster. There was no middle ground now. She'd stepped into the spotlight, and there was no stepping back. Gerald materialized from the crowd, his face crimson with rage. "What the hell was that? You're fired. Do you understand me? Fired." "I quit," Zarya said, surprised at herself at how calm she sounded. Effective immediately. She didn't wait for his response. The staff corridor beckoned like a sanctuary, and she disappeared into its fluorescent-lit safety, leaving the ballroom's pandemonium behind. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting hard. She just quit her job, the job that paid for her mother's medications, the rent, the utilities, everything. What had she done? Her phone buzzed incessantly as she changed out of her uniform in the locker room. Text messages flooded in from numbers she didn't recognize. Social media notifications exploded across her screen. Someone had already uploaded video of her confrontation with Cale and was spreading like wildfire across the internet. Janitor challenges billionaire CEO to $800 million quantum duel. MIT dropout takes on tech giant. The most expensive mic drop in history. Zarya silenced her phone and sat on the bench, still holding her gray uniform. 3 years she'd worn this. 3 years of invisible labor, of swallowing pride, of watching others discuss her passion while she pushed a mop. And now, in one moment of fury and courage, she'd burned it all down. Her phone rang, an actual call, not a text. The number was unlisted, but something made her answer. "Miss Valoris?" The voice was male, young, nervous. "My name is Torin Cade. I'm a junior engineer at Tanaka Corporation. I was in the audience today." Zarya's grip tightened on the phone. "If you're calling to tell me I'm crazy, I'm calling because I believe you." The words came out in a rush. "Your theory about the multidimensional correction matrix. I've been working on something similar for the past year, but I didn't have the courage to present it. Everyone said it was impossible. That real-time correction would require processing power we don't have. But I think you're right. I think it could work." Zarya's breath caught. An ally. Someone who understood. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because what Mr. Tanaka did was wrong." Torin's voice hardened with conviction. "And because I want to help. I have access to Tanaka Corp's computational resources. Not the quantum computer, but enough processing power to run preliminary simulations. If you're serious about solving this, you're going to need data." Real data, not just theoretical models. Why would you risk your job for me? Because some things matter more than job security. He paused. And because I saw your face when he mocked you. I've seen that look before. In the mirror, every time someone dismissed my ideas because I'm just a junior engineer. You deserve the chance to prove them all wrong. Tears pricked Zarya's eyes, unexpected and hot. I don't even know you. You will. Can we meet? There's a public library on Boylston Street. I can bring my laptop, show you what I've been working on. No obligations, no strings. Just let me help. Zarya checked her watch. It was barely 10 in the morning, and her entire life had already imploded. What was one more impossibility? 2 o'clock, she said. Main reading room. I'll be there. And Miss Valoris? What you did today was the bravest thing I've ever seen. He hung up before she could respond. Zarya sat in the locker room for another 5 minutes, processing everything. Then she stood, squared her shoulders, and walked out into her new reality. She had 30 days to solve the impossible, no job, a mother who needed her, and apparently one ally in the form of a stranger who believed in correction matrices. The odds were astronomical. But then again, she spent 3 years studying quantum probability. Astronomical odds were just another Tuesday. The apartment smelled like medicinal soap and yesterday's dinner when Zarya finally made it home. She found her mother exactly where she'd left her, in the worn armchair, but now surrounded by printouts from news websites that Mrs. Chin must have brought over. Iloan's hands trembled as she held up a grainy screenshot of Zarya on stage, confronting Kale Tanaka. "Baby girl," her mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. "What did you do?" Zarya dropped her bag and knelt beside the chair, taking her mother's fragile hands in hers. "I did what you taught me to do, Mama. I stood up. You lost your job. I found my purpose." Zarya smoothed back her mother's graying hair, the same hair that had once been a magnificent crown of black curls, back when Iloan had danced on stages instead of being trapped in chairs. "I never should have abandoned my work. I thought I was choosing you over my career, but maybe I was just choosing fear over faith. Faith doesn't pay for my medications." "No, but $800 million will." Zarya tried to sound confident, even as doubt gnawed at her insides. "I can do this, Mama. I know I can. The solution is in my head. It's been there for months. I just need time and resources to prove it." Iloan studied her daughter's face with the intensity of someone who'd been reading that face for 27 years. "You really believe you can solve it?" "I don't believe. I know." And saying it out loud, Zarya realized it was true. The equation wasn't impossible. It was just waiting for someone to approach it from the right angle. "But I need you to trust me. These next 30 days are going to be hard. I might not be able to take as many shifts." "You don't have any shifts anymore." "Exactly." Zarya managed a smile. "So I'll have plenty of time to focus on this. Mrs. Chun said she can check on you more often. And I've already found someone who wants to help, a Tanaka Corp engineer who believes in my theory." "Someone from his company wants to help you beat him?" Iloan's eyebrows rose. "That seems risky." "Everything about this is risky, Mama." Zarya stood, her knees protesting the movement. "But so is doing nothing. So is watching you decline while I mop floors and pretend I'm not capable of more. I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of being afraid." Her mother reached out, cupping Zarya's cheek with a shaking hand. "Then show them what you're made of. Show them what a Valoris woman can do." The words wrapped around Zarya like armor, and she carried them with her to the library that afternoon. The Boston Public Library's main branch was a temple to knowledge, all marble columns and hushed reverence. Zarya had spent countless nights here, hunched over borrowed laptops, stealing Wi-Fi and hope in equal measure. She found Torin Cade in the main reading room, exactly where he'd said he'd be. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 25, with nervous energy and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His laptop was already open, screens filled with code and simulations that made Zarya's heart race with recognition. Miss Valoris. He stood so quickly he nearly knocked over his coffee. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "Call me Zarya." She slid into the seat across from him, eyes already scanning his work. And you should know, I don't have access to any equipment right now. No university resources, no corporate backing. I'm working from a studio apartment with whiteboards and determination. That's where I come in. Torin turned his laptop to face her. I've been running simulations on quantum error correction for the past 18 months. My approach was similar to yours, real-time management instead of isolation, but I couldn't get the math to stabilize. Look at this. He pulled up a simulation, and Zarya watched quantum states decay in real time, the correction matrix struggling to maintain coherence. It was beautiful and frustrating, so close to working but missing something crucial. Your dampening coefficients are wrong, Zarya said immediately. You're applying uniform correction across all dimensions, but decoherence isn't uniform. It cascades. You need weighted corrections that anticipate the cascade pattern. Torin's eyes widened. Can you show me? Zarya pulled out her battered notebook, the one she filled with 3 years of stolen insights. Her hand moved across the page, equations flowing like music, each variable placed with purpose and precision. Torin watched in silence, his expression shifting from curiosity to awe to something approaching reverence. This is brilliant, he breathed. This is actually brilliant. If we adjust the simulation parameters to match your coefficients. His fingers flew across the keyboard, translating her handwritten equations into code. They worked for 3 hours straight, oblivious to librarians' pointed looks and the other patrons' curious glances. Zarya felt alive in a way she hadn't since leaving MIT, her mind fully engaged, dancing with concepts that most people couldn't even comprehend. Torin was quick, intuitive, asking exactly the right questions and challenging her assumptions in ways that sharpened her thinking. I need to ask you something, Zarya said as the library's closing announcement echoed through the hall. Why are you really helping me? You're risking your career at one of the most prestigious tech companies in the world. Torin closed his laptop slowly, his expression serious. Because what Kale did today was wrong. And because I'm tired of watching brilliant ideas die, because they came from the wrong person in the wrong position. He met her eyes, but mostly because I think you could change everything, and I want to be part of that. Zarya felt something shift in her chest. Hope, maybe, or the first stirrings of belief that she wasn't alone in this impossible fight. Then let's change everything, she said. The email arrived at 2 a.m, 3 days after confrontation. Zarya was still awake, hunched over her laptop at the kitchen table, running simulations on borrowed processing power that Torin had given her remote access to. Her eyes burned from screen glare, and her third cup of coffee had gone cold hours ago. She almost deleted the message, assuming it was another journalist fishing for a quote or a troll telling her she was delusional. Then she saw the sender's name, Kale Tanaka. Her hand froze on the mouse. The subject line read simply, I owe you an apology. Zarya's first instinct was to delete it. Her second was to respond with every curse word she'd been too professional to use in the ballroom. Instead, she clicked it open, curiosity overriding anger. Miss Valoris, I've started this email 17 times, and every version sounds inadequate. There's no eloquent way to apologize for what I did. I humiliated you in front of the world scientific community. I used you as a prop for a joke I thought would lighten the mood, never considering that you were a human being with dignity, intelligence, and a story I knew nothing about. My team did research after you left. I know about MIT now. I know about your mother. I know you were Dr. Elton Merrow's most promising student before you disappeared from the academic world. I know you sacrificed everything to care for someone you love, and I mocked you for it, without even realizing what I was mocking. I can't undo what I did. I can't take back the laughter or erase the video that's now been viewed 50 million times. But I can offer you something more valuable than an apology, resources. Tanaka Corporation's quantum supercomputer is the most advanced in the world. As of tonight, you have unrestricted access to it. I've attached the credentials and access protocols. No strings, no conditions. You said you've been developing a solution. Now you'll have the tools to prove it. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to trust me. But I do expect you to win. Because if your theory is half as revolutionary as my engineers say it might be, then you deserve every resource I can provide. The world already knows I'm an arrogant fool. Let's see if I can also be a man who recognizes genius when it literally stands up and confronts him. Kale Tanaka. P.S. Your 30-day deadline starts the moment you access the system, not a second before. You've earned that much control. Zarya read the email 3 times, searching for the catch, the hidden insult, the trap. But the attached credentials were real. She verified them against Tanaka Corp's public documentation. He was offering her access to a machine that cost more than most countries' GDP, the kind of computational power that could simulate quantum states with unprecedented accuracy. It was everything she needed. It was also deeply suspicious. She called Torin, not caring that it was the middle of the night. "Did you know about this?" she demanded when he answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Know about what?" "Kale Tanaka just gave me access to your quantum supercomputer." Silence. "Then he what?" "Full access. Unrestricted. He sent me an apology email and the credentials." Zarya paced her tiny kitchen. Phone pressed her ear. "Is this some kind of corporate game? Some way to steal my research?" "No." Torin sounded fully awake now. "No, that's not how he operates. Kale is arrogant and sometimes cruel, but he's not a thief. If he gave you access, he means it." A pause. "What did the email say?" Zarya read it to him, her voice dripping with skepticism on every word. "He's trying to make it right," Torin said quietly. "The media has been destroying him for the past 3 days. Every outlet is calling him a bully, a privileged CEO who punches down. His board of directors held an emergency meeting yesterday. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about his company's reputation. So this is damage control. Maybe, or maybe he actually feels guilty." Torin sighed. "Look, I've worked for Kale for 2 years. He's difficult, demanding, and his ego could fill a stadium. But when he's wrong, he admits it. This sounds like him trying to atone." Zarya stopped pacing. "You think I should accept?" "I think you'd be crazy not to. Do you know what we could accomplish with that level of processing power? We could run full-scale simulations, test every variable, stress test the correction matrix in ways that are impossible on my borrowed resources." Excitement crept into his voice. "Zarya, this could be the difference between theory and proof." She wanted to refuse. Pride demanded she solve this problem on her own terms, without help from the man who'd humiliated her. But pride was a luxury she couldn't afford, not with her mother's medication running low and the clock already ticking. "How do I know he won't sabotage me?" she asked. "What if I input my data and he steals the solution?" "The quantum computer keeps encrypted logs of everything. If he tried to steal your work, there'd be evidence, and his entire company would face legal consequences that would make the current PR nightmare look like a minor inconvenience." Torin's voice softened. "But more than that, I've seen him when he's fascinated by something. He gets this look, like he's discovered a new puzzle. That's the look he had when you walked off that stage. He doesn't want to steal your solution. He wants to see if you can actually do it." Zarya looked at her mother, asleep in the next room, her breathing labored even in rest. She thought about the bills stacked on the counter, the eviction notice she'd hidden, the desperate calculations she'd been running about how long they could survive without her income. "Tell me how to access the system," she said finally. "And Torin? Tomorrow we start for real." "Tomorrow," he agreed, "we change the world." Zarya hung up and stared at her laptop screen, at the credentials that represented both opportunity and risk. Then she opened a new document and began translating her whiteboard equations into a format the quantum computer could understand. The 30-day countdown hadn't started yet, but her real work had just begun. Outside her window, Boston prepared for dawn, unaware that in a cramped studio apartment in South Boston, a former janitor was about to rewrite the laws of quantum physics. The Tanaka Corporation building rose like a glass monument to ambition in downtown Boston's financial district. Zarya had cleaned buildings like this before, temples of steel and money where people like her entered through service doors and left through loading docks. Now she was walking to the main entrance, her visitor badge declaring her a research consultant, which felt like the universe's idea of a cosmic joke. Torin met her in the lobby, practically vibrating with nervous energy. I can't believe you're actually here. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe I'm trusting a billionaire who publicly mocked me. Zarya adjusted the strap of her messenger bag, which contained her laptop, 3 notebooks, and every scrap of research she'd accumulated over 3 years. Everything she owned that mattered, digitally and intellectually, was in this bag. The quantum lab is on the 47th floor, Torin said, guiding her toward a private elevator that required biometric scanning. I should warn you, people are going to stare. The video has 20 million views on YouTube alone. You're kind of famous now. Infamous, you mean? The elevator doors opened, and they stepped into a corridor that looked more like a spaceship than an office building. Everything was white chrome and humming with barely contained power. Scientists in lab coats moved with purpose, their conversations peppered with jargon that made Zarya's heart ache with familiarity. This was her world, the one she'd been exiled from. They did stare. Every head turned as she passed, conversations stopping mid-sentence. Some faces showed curiosity, others skepticism, a few open hostility. Zarya kept her chin up and her eyes forward, channeling every ounce of dignity her mother had taught her. Ignore them, Torin muttered. Half of them are jealous they didn't have your courage. The quantum computing lab was breathtaking. The supercomputer itself was housed behind walls of reinforced glass, a massive array of processors and cooling systems that represented the cutting edge of human technological achievement. Workstations surrounded it like acolytes around an altar, each screen displaying real-time data flows that would make most computers weep. And standing in the center of it all, hands in his pockets, was Kale Tanaka. He looked different than he had on stage. Smaller somehow, despite being easily 6 feet tall. His suit was impeccable as always, but something in his posture suggested discomfort. When he saw Zarya, he straightened, and she watched him visibly steel himself for the confrontation. Miss Valoris. He didn't extend his hand, which she appreciated. Thank you for coming. I'm not here for you, Zarya said coldly. I'm here for the computer. Understood. If her tone bothered him, he didn't show it. Let me show you your workspace. He led her to a private lab partition off on the main floor, equipped with everything she could possibly need. Multiple monitors, high-speed connections, and direct interface capability with the quantum processor. It was a researcher's paradise, worth millions of dollars in equipment alone. This is yours for the duration of the challenge, Kale said. No one will disturb you without permission. Your work is encrypted and protected by the highest security protocols we have. And he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I want you to know that I meant what I said in the email. I was wrong. Profoundly, inexcusably wrong. Zarya turned to face him fully. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. This wasn't a man performing contrition. This was someone genuinely uncomfortable with his own behavior. Do you know what it's like, she asked quietly, to be brilliant and invisible at the same time? To understand conversations happening around you while people assume you're too stupid to comprehend them? To have sacrificed everything for knowledge, only to be treated like you're incapable of having any. Kale's expression tightened with something that looked like pain. No, I've never been invisible a day in my life. Then you can't possibly understand what you did to me. Zarya dropped her bag on the workstation desk. But you can give me the space to prove you wrong. That's all I need from you. Space and access. Keep your apologies. I'll take your resources instead. Fair enough. He moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I've read your MIT transcripts. Dr. Merrill sent them over. With your permission, he said, you weren't just promising. You were exceptional. The kind of exceptional that comes along once in a generation. Was exceptional, Zarya corrected bitterly. Past tense. Are exceptional, Kale countered. Present tense. Genius doesn't expire just because circumstances force you out of academia. If anything, he gestured at her notebooks. 3 years of independent research while working full-time and caring for a sick parent? That's not a resume gap. That's a testament to determination most people can't imagine. Before Zarya could respond, her phone rang. Her mother's ringtone, the one that meant emergency. She answered immediately, her stomach plummeting. "Mama?" "Baby, I'm sorry to interrupt." Iloan's voice was weak, strained. "I fell trying to get to the bathroom. Mrs. Chin called an ambulance. They're taking me to Boston General." The world tilted. "I'm coming right now. Don't move. Don't do anything." "I'm fine, honey. Just bruised. But maybe you should." "I'm already gone." Zarya was grabbing her bag, her heart thundering. All thoughts of quantum equations and billion-dollar prizes evaporated in the face of the only thing that truly mattered. Kale was already at the door, car keys in hand. "My driver is faster. Come on." "I don't need." "Your mother needs you there as quickly as possible. My car has a police escort clearance for emergencies." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "You can hate me during the drive. Move." Zarya didn't have time to argue. She followed him to the elevator, and within 3 minutes they were in the back of a sleek black car that moved through Boston traffic like water, the driver navigating with practiced efficiency that suggested he'd done this before. Kale said nothing, just handed her his phone. "Call the hospital. Tell them Kale Tanaka's mother is being admitted and provide her the best care available." "That's not." "It is now." His jaw was set. "Let me do this much. Please." Zarya made the call because pride was nothing compared to her mother's well-being. Boston General's emergency room was a study in controlled chaos, nurses moving with practiced urgency, machines beeping their digital symphonies, and a distinctive smell of antiseptic that Zarya had come to associate with fear and hope in equal measure. She burst through the automatic doors with Kale trailing behind her, his presence drawing curious stares from staff and patients alike. "Iloan Valoris," Zarya said breathlessly to the admitting nurse. "She was brought in by ambulance about 20 minutes ago. Fall victim, neurological patient." "Room 7, the nurse interrupted, but her expression had shifted from professional to almost reverent. "Dr. Castellanos is with her now. She's stable, Miss Valoris. You can go right back." The speed of the response, the deference in the nurse's tone, Zarya knew immediately that Kale's phone call had worked its magic. In a hospital where people waited hours for attention, money, and influence had carved a path straight to the front of the line. She hated that it worked. She hated that she was grateful. Her mother was propped up in a hospital bed, looking small and fragile against the white sheets. A purple bruise was already blooming on her left cheekbone, and her right wrist was wrapped in a temporary brace. But she was conscious, alert, and attempting to smile when she saw her daughter. "Baby girl, I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize." Zarya was at her bedside in an instant, taking her mother's uninjured hand with infinite gentleness. "What happened?" "What did the doctor say?" "Mild concussion, sprained wrist, bruised ribs." Iloan's voice was tired but steady. "The neurologist wants to run some tests. They're concerned the fall might indicate disease progression." The words landed like physical blows. Disease progression. The phrase that haunted Zarya's nightmares. The inevitable march toward an ending she refused to accept. A doctor entered. Dr. Castellanos, according to her badge, with a tablet and the kind expression that came from delivering difficult news regularly. "Miss Valoris, I'm glad you're here. Your mother's injuries from the fall are relatively minor, but I'm concerned about the underlying cause. Her balance and coordination have deteriorated significantly since her last visit 6 months ago." "We couldn't afford the follow-up appointments," Zarya said quietly, shame burning in her throat. "I understand." Dr. Castellanos didn't judge, which somehow made it worse. "The good news is that there's a new treatment protocol that's showing remarkable results in early trials. It's experimental, not covered by insurance, and the cost is..." She glanced at her tablet. "Approximately $40,000 per month for the first year." Zarya did the math instantly. Nearly $500,000. More than she'd make in a decade of janitorial work, even if she still had the job. "However," the doctor continued, "Mr. Tanaka has already authorized treatment under his company's Medical Research Partnership Program. If you consent, we can begin the protocol as early as tomorrow." Zarya turned to find Kale standing in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. You had no right. I had every right to offer help to someone in need, he interrupted gently. The research program is legitimate. We partner with Boston General to provide access to experimental treatments. Your mother qualifies based on her diagnosis. The only question is whether you allow your pride to prevent her from receiving care that could extend her life. It was a low blow, and they both knew it, but it was also effective. Eloan squeezed Zaria's hand. Baby, let them help. Please. The surrender tasted bitter, but Zaria nodded to the doctor. What do we need to sign? The paperwork took an hour. Cale excused himself to make phone calls, giving them privacy while mother and daughter navigated consent forms and treatment protocols. When the doctor finally left, promising to return in the morning to begin treatment, Zaria collapsed into the chair beside her mother's bed. You should go, Eloan said softly. You have work to do, important work. Nothing is more important than you. Then do it for me. Her mother's eyes were fierce despite her physical fragility. That man humiliated you in front of the world. Don't let him buy forgiveness with money. Go solve that impossible equation. Take his $800 million and show everyone what a valorous woman can do when she's given the chance. Mama, I'm not going anywhere tonight. Eloan managed a weak smile. Mrs. Chen already called. She's coming to sit with me. You have access to equipment you'll never have again. Use it. Make this sacrifice mean something. Zaria wanted to argue, but her mother was right. The clock was ticking on her 30-day deadline, and every hour mattered. She kissed Eloan's forehead, promised to return first thing in the morning, and found Cale waiting in the corridor, his phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call when he saw her. How is she? Stable. Scared. Grateful for your intervention. Even if I'm not sure I am. Zaria crossed her arms. Why are you doing this? The computer access, I understand. That's about proving your challenge is legitimate. But paying for my mother's treatment? That's not your responsibility. Cale was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. My father died of a degenerative neurological disease 7 years ago, he said finally. We had all the money in the world, access to every experimental treatment the best doctor's money could buy. And he still died, slowly and painfully, while I watched helplessly. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and honest. I can't bring him back, Cale continued. I can't undo the years I spent building his company instead of spending time with him. But I can make sure that another brilliant person doesn't lose their parent because of something as arbitrary as money. Call it penance. Call it privilege guilt. Call it whatever you want. But let me do this. Zaria searched his face for manipulation, for hidden agenda, for anything that would justify her anger. But all she saw was grief, poorly hidden beneath expensive tailoring and corporate confidence. I don't know how to feel about you, she admitted. One moment I want to throw your apology back in your face. The next, I'm watching you save my mother's life. You don't have to feel anything about me. Cale's voice was steady. But maybe you can accept that people are complicated. I'm capable of being cruel and kind, arrogant and humble, wrong and trying to be right, just like everyone else. Most people don't have the resources to make their attempts at redemption quite so dramatic. True. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But I've never been good at doing things by halves. Come on, I'll take you back to the lab. You have an equation to solve. They drove in silence, the city lights blurring past the windows. Zaria's mind was already returning to her research, to the variables and matrices that had consumed 3 years of her life. But something had shifted. The man beside her was no longer just a villain of her story. He was becoming something far more complicated and far more dangerous to her carefully constructed walls. When they reached Tanaka Corporation, Cale walked her to the lab personally. At the door, he paused. Zaria, for what it's worth, I'm sorry about your mother, and I hope the treatment works. Me too, she whispered. Then she entered her workspace, closed the door, and prepared to bend the universe to her will. The quantum computer hummed like a living thing. Its processors cooled to near absolute zero, existing in that liminal space between classical physics and quantum possibility. Zarya stood before the main interface at 3 in the morning on her 4th day of access, her reflection ghostly in the monitor's glow. Torin had left hours ago, exhausted but exhilarated by their progress. Now it was just her and the machine, engaged in a conversation spoken in mathematics. She input the next iteration of her correction matrix, her fingers flying across the keyboard with the confidence of someone who'd lived with these equations longer than some people maintain relationships. The simulation initialized, and she watched as thousands of quantum bits began their delicate dance, each one a probability wave waiting to collapse into certainty. For the first 3 seconds, everything held. The correction matrix compensated for environmental interference exactly as she predicted, maintaining coherence through active management rather than passive isolation. Zarya's heart hammered against her ribs. For seconds. 5. The matrix was working, actually working. Then the cascade began. A single qubit decovered, and like dominoes falling, the entire system collapsed into chaos within milliseconds. The monitors flared red with failure diagnostics. Damn it! Zarya slumped in her chair, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. This was the 7th failed simulation today, each one lasting slightly longer than the last, but none achieving the stability threshold needed for practical quantum computing. You're close. She spun to find Kale standing in the doorway, 2 coffee cups in hand. He was in shirt sleeves, his tie loosened, looking as tired as she felt. I thought you went home. I have an apartment on the 52nd floor. I haven't actually left this building in 3 days. He offered her one of the cups. Peace offering. Black. 2 sugars. Tora mentioned it's how you take it. Zarya accepted the coffee because her pride wasn't strong enough to overcome her caffeine addiction. How long have you been watching? Long enough to see your matrix hold for 5.3 seconds. That's longer than anyone in history has maintained quantum coherence at this scale. He moved closer to the monitors, studying her code with the focused intensity of someone who actually understood what he was looking at. The cascade is starting in Sector 7, qubit cluster 42 through 48. Why? Because I'm missing something. Zarya rubbed her eyes, which felt like they'd been sandblasted. The weighted corrections work, but there's a propagation delay I can't account for. By the time the matrix detects decoherence in one sector and applies a correction, the cascade has already begun in adjacent sectors. So you need predictive correction, not reactive, which requires modeling probable decoherence patterns before they occur, which requires processing power beyond even this machine's capabilities. She gestured at the quantum computer with frustration. It's an impossible recursion. I need a stable quantum computer to predict quantum instability, but I can't achieve stability without the predictions. Kale was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Then, what if you're thinking about it backwards? Excuse me? You're trying to predict chaos, which is impossible. But what if instead of predicting where decoherence will occur, you predict where it won't, create islands of force stability, and let the system self-organize around them? Zarya's mind seized on the idea, turning it over like a jewel catching light. Constraint-based correction instead of comprehensive coverage. Use less computational power, but apply it more strategically. Her exhaustion evaporated as the implications cascaded through her thoughts. That could actually work. That could, oh my God, that's brilliant. She was already at her keyboard, fingers flying as she modified her code. Kale pulled up a chair beside her, and they worked in synchronized silence, her theoretical framework merging with his intuitive understanding of system architecture. He'd pull up a simulation. She'd adjust the parameters. She'd propose a constraint pattern. He'd optimize the computational efficiency. An hour passed. Then 2. The coffee went cold and forgotten. Try it now, Kale said, his voice tight with anticipation. Zarya initiated the simulation. The quantum bits activated, probability waves collapsing and reforming in patterns that looked almost organic. The correction matrix engaged, but this time it created strategic pockets of enforced stability, bright points of coherence that the surrounding qubits naturally aligned with, like magnets finding their poles. 3 seconds. 5. 8. The cascade didn't come. 10 seconds. 15. 20. It's holding, Kale breathed. 30 seconds. 1 minute. 2 minutes. The coherence remained stable, the quantum state maintained with fidelity that shouldn't have been possible. Zarya couldn't breathe, couldn't move, afraid that any disruption would shatter the miracle occurring before her eyes. 5 minutes. 10. At the 15-minute mark, Zarya terminated the simulation manually, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hit the keys. The data was saved, backed up, encrypted. Proof. Undeniable, revolutionary proof. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Cale turned to her, and the expression on his face was something between awe and joy and a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "You did it. I just asked a question." The right question at the right time. Zarya found herself smiling, genuine and unguarded, for the first time since entering this building. "Do you understand what this means? This isn't just solving the challenge. This is changing everything. Quantum computing that's stable enough for practical applications, drug discovery, climate modeling, cryptography, artificial intelligence. Saving lives," Cale added quietly, "including, potentially, your mother's. Quantum computers that could model neurological diseases and design personalized treatments." The mention of her mother should have brought her back to Earth, reminded her of the stakes, the tension, the complicated mess of their relationship. Instead, Zarya found herself studying Cale's face in the monitor light, the sharp intelligence in his eyes, the barely contained excitement that made him look younger, more human. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "Really, is it guilt? Redemption? Proving something to the board of directors?" Cale met her gaze directly. "Do you want the truth?" "Always. Because watching you work is the most extraordinary thing I've ever witnessed." His voice was steady, honest. "You're not just brilliant. Lots of people are brilliant. You're relentless. You sacrificed everything for knowledge and family, and somehow you're still standing, still fighting, still believing you can bend the universe to your will. That kind of determination doesn't need resources or recognition. It just needs to exist, and everything else arranges itself around it." The words hung between them, intimating in a way that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with being truly seen. "I should run more simulations," Zarya said, her voice not quite steady. "Verify the results. Test the constraints under different conditions." "You should sleep," Cale countered. "Real sleep in a real bed. The data will still be here in 6 hours." "I don't have time." "You have 23 days left. You just achieved in 4 days what the world's best minds couldn't do in a decade. Takes 6 hours to be human." He stood, offering his hand. "Come on. Guest quarters on 52. Torin uses them all the time." Zarya hesitated, then took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. His palm was warm, calloused despite the expensive suits, the hands of someone who built things, not just inherited them. "Cale, thank you. For the question. For everything." "Thank you," he replied, "for proving that impossible is just another word for not yet." Day 8 arrived with the weight of inevitability. Zarya stood in the Quantum Lab's server room, flanked by Torin on her left and Cale on her right, while a small audience of Tanaka Corporation's senior scientists watched from behind the observation glass. This wasn't a simulation anymore. This was the real thing. Her correction matrix uploaded to the actual quantum hardware, about to either revolutionize computing or fail spectacularly in front of witnesses. "You don't have to do this yet," Torin said quietly. "We could run more tests, refine parameters." "We've run 47 successful simulations," Zarya interrupted, her voice calmer than she felt. "The math is sound. The implementation is clean. If I wait any longer, I'm just procrastinating out of fear." Cale said nothing, but she felt his presence like an anchor, steady, solid, unexpectedly comforting. Over the past 4 days, he'd become something she hadn't anticipated, a collaborator. He'd bring her meals when she forgot to eat, challenge her assumptions when her thinking grew circular, and sit in companionable silence during the long hours when words were inadequate for the work at hand. She'd started to forget why she'd hated him. "Initializing quantum processor," she announced, her fingers moving across the control interface. The massive machine behind the glass hummed to a higher frequency, its cooling systems working overtime to maintain the near-absolute zero temperatures required for quantum coherence. The monitors flickered to life, displaying real-time data from 3,000 quantum bits, each one a swirling probability cloud waiting to be harnessed. Without her correction matrix, they'd maintain coherence for maybe 3 seconds before collapsing into useless noise. Uploading correction matrix now. Her code flooded into the system, elegant lines of mathematics translated into executable instructions. The constraint-based ability islands activated first, glowing like beacons in the quantum foam. Then the weighted corrections engaged, creating a dynamic scaffold that anticipated and managed decoherence patterns. The quantum bit stabilized. 3 seconds. 5. 10. Behind the glass, one of the senior scientists gasped audibly. 15 seconds. 30. 1 minute. Coherence holding at 99.7%. Torin reported, his voice shaking with excitement. Fidelity is unprecedented. This is actually working. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Zarya initiated a test calculation, a protein folding simulation that would normally take a classical supercomputer 6 months to complete. The quantum processor sees the problem. It stabilized qubits working in synchronized harmony, exploring millions of probability pathways simultaneously. The answer appeared in 47 seconds. Verify it, Zarya commanded, not daring to hope. Torin cross-referenced the quantum output against known results, his hand still on the keyboard. Perfect accuracy, down to the atomic level. Zarya, this is revolutionary, Kale finished, his voice barely above a whisper. He was staring at the monitors like a man witnessing a miracle. You didn't just solve the decoherence problem. You've made quantum computing practical. The system ran for 30 minutes before Zarya finally powered it down, her legs weak with the realization of what she'd accomplished. Around her, the senior scientists were erupting into excited chatter, their earlier skepticism transformed into reverent awe. "We need to prepare a presentation," one of them said. "The academic community needs to see this verified by independent observers." "No," Kale interrupted firmly. "Miss Valoris deserves to present her own work on her own terms. We'll arrange a public demonstration. The same ballroom where this began." He turned to Zarya, and something in his expression made her heart stutter. Pride, admiration, and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. 8 days, he said softly, meant only for her. You solved the impossible in 8 days. The presentation was scheduled for exactly 1 week later. Tanaka Corporation's PR team worked overtime, sending invitations to every major scientific institution, technology company, and media outlet in the world. The response was overwhelming. The same ballroom that had hosted her humiliation would now witness her vindication. Zarya spent those 7 days refining her presentation, running additional verifications, and visiting her mother, whose treatment was showing promising early results. Eloan's tremors had decreased, her balance improved. The hope that had been absent from her eyes for years was beginning to return. "I'm so proud of you, baby girl," Eloan said during one visit, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "Not for solving the equation, for standing up, for believing in yourself when the world told you to stay small." But as the presentation day approached, Zarya found herself increasingly nervous. Not about the science, but about facing that room again. The memory of 2,000 people laughing at her still stung, a wound that success couldn't entirely heal. The night before the presentation, she found Kale on the roof of Tanaka Corporation, staring out at Boston's glittering skyline. He'd been scarce the past few days, giving her space to prepare, but she'd felt his absence like a missing puzzle piece. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, joining him at the railing. "Thinking about tomorrow, about how profoundly I misjudged you." He turned to face her fully. "I've been in the technology world my entire life, surrounded by brilliant people. But you're different. You didn't just solve a problem. You redefined how we think about the problem itself. That's not intelligence. That's genius. You helped," Zarya said, surprised by how much she meant it. "The constraint-based approach was your insight. A single question in a sea of answers you'd already discovered." Kale moved closer, and Zarya's breath caught at the intensity in his dark eyes. I need to tell you something before tomorrow, while it's just us. No audience, no cameras, no pressure. What? I'm falling for you. The words were simple, direct, terrifying. I know the timing is terrible. I know I have no right after what I did. But watching you work, seeing your determination, your grace under pressure, the way you love your mother fiercely enough to sacrifice everything. Zarya, you've completely undone me. She should step back, should remind him of the power imbalance, the complicated history, the fact that 8 days ago she'd hated everything he represented. Instead, she found herself closing the distance between them. I don't know what I feel, she admitted honestly. You humiliated me. Then you saved my mother. You gave me the resources to prove myself. But you also collaborated instead of just observing. I'm angry and grateful and confused and tomorrow none of that matters, Kale interrupted gently. Tomorrow, you stand on that stage and show the world what you're capable of. Whatever happens between us, or doesn't happen, that moment is yours alone. I just needed you to know that I see you. Really see you. Not the janitor. Not the MIT dropout. Not the woman circumstances forced into an impossible choice. I see Zarya Valoris, who is extraordinary in ways that have nothing to do with quantum physics. Zarya kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't rational, but in that moment it felt inevitable, like quantum particles collapsing from probability into certainty. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Kale smiled. That was complicated. Zarya finished. We'll figure out complicated later. Right now, I have a presentation to deliver. Then let's go change the world. Together. They returned inside, ready for the dawn that would transform everything. The ballroom looked exactly as it had 8 days ago. The same crystal chandeliers, the same marble floors, the same 2,000 seats filled with the world's scientific elite. But everything else had changed. Zarya stood backstage in a tailored navy suit that Kale had insisted on providing, her natural hair styled in elegant twists that her mother had helped perfect that morning. She looked like who she'd always been inside, a scientist, a scholar, a force of nature contained in human form. 5 minutes, Miss Valoris, a stage manager said, his tone respectful in a way it hadn't been 8 days ago. Torrin appeared at her elbow, practically vibrating with nervous energy. I've triple-checked everything. The data feeds are live. The simulation is queued, and I've got backup systems for the backup systems. You're going to be amazing. I'm terrified, Zarya admitted, her hands trembling slightly. What if I freeze? What if the presentation fails? What if? Then you'll handle it, Kale said, emerging from the shadows. He'd kept his distance all morning, respecting the space she needed to prepare, but now his presence steadied her like gravity. But you won't fail. I've watched you work for 8 days straight. You don't know how to fail, only how to persist until success becomes inevitable. Dr. Elton Merrow, her former MIT professor, appeared backstage with tears already forming in his eyes. He'd flown in from Cambridge specifically for this moment. Zarya, my brilliant student, I knew when I saw that video that you'd show them all. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder to keep you at MIT when your mother got sick. You had nothing to be sorry for, Zarya said, embracing him. You taught me that knowledge isn't confined to universities. It exists wherever curious minds dare to ask questions. 2 minutes, the stage manager called. Zarya took a deep breath, centering herself. In the audience sat Nobel laureates, CEOs, venture capitalists, and journalists from every major publication on Earth. Somewhere in the middle section, her mother sat in a wheelchair, Mrs. Chin beside her, both women dressed in their finest. Iloan had insisted on attending despite her doctor's concerns, determined to witness her daughter's triumph. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd, and Zarya Valoris walked onto the stage where she'd been humiliated, her spine straight, her chin high, her fear transformed into fuel. Good morning, she began, her voice clear and steady through the microphone. My name is Zarya Valoris. 8 days ago, I stood on this stage as a janitor being mocked for daring to believe I could contribute to quantum physics. Today, I stand before you as the person who solved the decoherence equation. The silence was absolute, electric with anticipation. For 10 years, the scientific community has approached quantum decoherence as an isolation problem. Keep the qubits separate, minimize environmental interaction, preserve the fragile quantum state through prevention. This approach has yielded incremental improvements, but no fundamental breakthrough. I'm here to tell you that we've been asking the wrong question. She clicked the remote, and the massive screen behind her filled with her equations. 3 years of secret work, displayed for the world to see. Quantum particles don't want to be isolated. Interaction is their fundamental nature. My solution doesn't fight this nature. It harnesses it. By implementing a multidimensional correction matrix with constraint-based stability islands, we can actively manage decoherence in real time, maintaining quantum coherence indefinitely. The presentation unfolded like a symphony. Zarya walked the audience through her theoretical framework, explaining complex concepts with clarity and precision. She showed simulation results. Then, in the moment that made several physicists gasp audibly, she displayed the live data feed from yesterday's 30-minute quantum computation. This wasn't a simulation, she said, letting that sink in. This was actual quantum hardware, maintaining coherence at 99.7% fidelity for 30 consecutive minutes. To put that in perspective, the previous record was 3 seconds. Dr. Martinez stood up from her seat, starting an applause that rippled through the ballroom like a wave. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, the thunderous ovation washing over Zarya like validation made audible. She waited for silence, then continued, "But I didn't solve this alone. I had help from Cade, whose engineering insights were invaluable, from Dr. Elton Merrow, who taught me to think beyond conventional boundaries, and from Kale Tanaka, who asked one crucial question that unlocked the final piece of the puzzle." She found Kale in the wings, watching with an expression of pure admiration. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Recognition, respect, the beginning of something neither of them had planned, but both were ready to explore. The implications of stable quantum computing are profound, Zarya continued. Drug discovery that takes decades could happen in months. Climate models could achieve accuracy that makes meaningful intervention possible. Diseases like the one affecting my mother could be understood at the molecular level and treated with precision we've never achieved. She paused, her voice softening. I solved this equation because I had to, because my mother is dying and conventional medicine moves too slowly, because I refuse to accept that brilliant minds should be locked out of science due to economic circumstances, because someone told me I couldn't, and I've never been good at accepting limitations. The audience was silent now, hanging on every word. Kale Tanaka offered an $800 million prize for solving this equation. I'm accepting that prize, and I'm using $100 million of it to establish the Valores Foundation, which will provide full scholarships and support for students who are also caregivers for sick family members. No one should have to choose between their passion and their family. No one should be invisible because circumstances force them into jobs that don't reflect their capabilities. The applause this time was deafening, sustained, transformative. Zarya saw her mother weeping openly, saw Dr. Merrow beaming with pride, saw Torin punch in the air in triumph. And then Kale walked onto the stage, carrying an oversized ceremonial check that represented more money than Zarya had ever imagined possessing. But instead of simply handing it over, he took the microphone. 8 days ago, I made a terrible mistake, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. I judged someone by their uniform instead of their capabilities. I used my platform to mock someone who deserved respect. I was arrogant, cruel, and profoundly wrong. He turned to face Zarya directly. You could have taken your solution anywhere. You could have refused my resources, solved this independently, and humiliated me in return. Instead, you showed grace, determination, and a generosity of spirit that I didn't deserve. You didn't just solve an equation. You taught me about humility, about perseverance, and about the danger of assumptions. Kale extended the check, but also something else, a formal letter on Tanaka Corporation letterhead. This is an offer for the position of Chief Innovation Officer at Tanaka Corporation, reporting directly to me. Your salary would be $5 million annually, with full equity participation and complete autonomy over research direction. You'd have unlimited resources to pursue any scientific question that interests you. Zarya took both items with shaking hands. I accept both the prize and the position. The ballroom erupted again, but Kale wasn't finished. He moved closer, speaking quietly enough that only she could hear over the noise. And when you're ready, no pressure, no timeline, I'd like to take you to dinner. As equals, as colleagues, as two people who maybe have a chance at something beyond professional respect. I'd like that, Zarya whispered back. The press conference that followed was chaos. Questions flew from every direction. Cameras flashed like lightning, and journalists competed to capture the story of a century. But Zarya handled it all with the same steady confidence she brought to the quantum problem, answering technical questions with precision, deflecting personal inquiries with grace, and consistently redirecting attention to the broader implications of her work. When it finally ended, 3 hours later, she found her mother backstage. Iloan was exhausted but radiant, her eyes bright with tears and pride. "My brilliant girl," she whispered as Zarya knelt beside the wheelchair. "You did it. You actually did it. We did it, Mama. All of this was for you." "No, baby. It was always for you. I was just the excuse you needed to believe in yourself." The next weeks blurred together in a whirlwind of activity. The Valoris Foundation was established with Torin as its operations director. Zarya's solution was independently verified by 3 separate institutions, each one confirming what the world already knew: quantum computing had been revolutionized. Her mother's treatment continued with remarkable success, the experimental protocol showing results beyond anyone's projections. And through it all, Kale was there, not as a boss, not as a benefactor, but as a partner in every sense of the word. They worked together in the lab, debated over dinner, and slowly, carefully, built something neither of them had expected: a relationship founded on mutual respect, shared passion, and the kind of intellectual connection that most people spend lifetimes searching for. 6 months after the presentation, Dorian Quill, CEO of Tanaka Corporation's largest competitor, published a paper attempting to discredit Zarya's work. He called it a statistical anomaly, suggested the results couldn't be replicated, and strongly implied that Kale had manufactured the data to rehabilitate his public image. The scientific community waited to see how Zarya would respond. She didn't engage on social media, didn't write angry rebuttals. Instead, she simply invited Quill and a panel of independent observers to Tanaka Corporation's lab, where she ran the quantum computation live, in front of witnesses, with equipment they brought themselves to eliminate any possibility of deception. The system ran flawlessly for 2 hours. Then, while the observers were still reeling, Zarya calmly presented additional research she'd been developing, an extension of her correction matrix that solved a related paradox in quantum entanglement that had puzzled physicists for decades. She hadn't publicized this work, hadn't sought attention for it. She'd simply continued doing what she did best, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. Quill left the building in silence. His company's stock dropped 18% that afternoon. Zarya's reputation as not just a one-time success, but a genuine visionary was cemented. Forbes named her one of the world's most influential scientists. MIT offered her an endowed chair. 3 universities renamed their physics departments in her honor. She turned down the academic positions and stayed at Tanaka Corporation, where she had the resources to continue her work without bureaucratic constraints. 1 year after her presentation, the Valoris Foundation held its inaugural gala. 500 students had received full scholarships, and the Foundation Support Network had helped dozens of families navigate the impossible balance between education and caregiving. The event was held in the same ballroom where everything had begun, transformed now into a celebration of possibility instead of humiliation. Zarya stood on that stage once more, wearing an emerald gown that made her feel like royalty, preparing to give her opening remarks. But before she could begin, Kale walked out from the wings. He wasn't holding a microphone this time. He was holding a blueprint. "Zarya Valoris," he said, his voice carried without amplification. "You've spent the past year changing the world. You revolutionized quantum computing, established a foundation that's transforming STEM education, and inspired millions of people to believe that circumstances don't define capability." He unrolled the blueprint on the podium. Architectural plans for a massive research institute, sleek and modern, with laboratories and classrooms and collaboration spaces. At the top, In elegant letters, the Valores Institute for Advanced Research. I want to build this, Cale continued, not as a monument to what you've accomplished, but as a launching pad for what you'll accomplish next. A place where brilliant minds can pursue audacious questions without worrying about funding or politics or anything except discovery. Tears streamed down Zaria's face as she studied the plans, her name, her vision, her legacy made tangible. Then Cale dropped to one knee, and the ballroom went silent. But more than that, he said, producing a ring that glittered under chandelier light. I want to spend the rest of my life watching you redefine impossible. I want to be your partner in discovery, your supporter in challenges, your equal in all things. Zaria, will you marry me? The words caught in her throat, overwhelmed by the magnitude of how far she'd come. From a janitor mocked on this very stage to a celebrated scientist being proposed by the man who'd once humiliated her but had since become her fiercest advocate. Yes, she finally managed, her voice breaking with emotion. Yes, absolutely yes. The ballroom erupted as Cale slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss that felt like both an ending and a beginning. The close of one impossible chapter and the start of another. The wedding, 6 months later, was an intimate affair. They married in a small ceremony that blended their cultures and honored both the journey they'd taken separately and the path they'd walked together. Iloan walked her daughter down the aisle, her steps steady thanks to the treatment Cale's intervention had provided. Dr. Merrill officiated. Torin served as best man, still in awe that the janitor he'd approached in the library had become family. In her vows, Zaria promised to never stop asking questions. Cale promised to never stop providing the resources to answer them. 2 years after the wedding, Zaria stood in the completed Valores Institute, surrounded by 50 of the world's brightest young scientists, students who'd been supported by her foundation, who'd been told they didn't belong in academia, who'd been invisible until someone gave them the chance to shine. She thought about the girl who'd woken up at 4 a.m. to clean buildings while her mind solved quantum equations. She thought about the moment of humiliation that had become her catalyst. She thought about her mother, healthy now, traveling the world to speak about the importance of supporting caregivers in STEM fields. Most of all, she thought about the impossible equation she'd solved, not just a mathematical one, but the human one. How cruelty could transform into kindness. How humiliation could birth determination. How the janitor could become the chief innovation officer, the mocked to become the celebrated, and the invisible could become unforgettable. Cale found her standing at the window, watching the sunset paint Boston's skyline in gold and crimson. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked. About how $800 million bought me justice. But the real prize was learning I never needed anyone's validation to be extraordinary, Zaria replied. She turned in his arms, meeting his eyes with the same steady confidence she'd shown on that stage 2 years ago. And about how the best things in life come from the moments when we refuse to accept the limitations others place on us. Speaking of which, Cale said with a smile that had become as familiar to her as her own reflection, your team made a breakthrough on the neural regeneration project. They think they're 6 months from human trials. Zaria's heart soared. 6 months from treatments that could help people like her mother, derived from the quantum computing revolution she'd sparked. The ripple effects of that one moment of courage, of standing up and saying, I accept your challenge, had transformed not just her life, but potentially millions of others. Then we'd better get to work, she said, taking his hand. We have a world to change. Together, they walked back into the laboratory. 2 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, bound by love, respect, and the shared belief that impossible was just another problem waiting for the right mind to solve it. And somewhere in the quantum foam of possibility, probability waves collapsed into certainty. Zaria Valores had not just won a challenge. She'd rewritten the rules of what was possible when determination met opportunity, when talent was given resources, and when someone dared to look beyond the uniform to see the genius underneath. The janitor had solved the impossible equation, and in doing so, she'd proven that the only true limitations are the ones we accept.
Wow, thank you so much for watching. Seriously, your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed this video, the biggest way you can show me love and encourage me to keep creating is to hit that like button and subscribe. Takes 1 second, but it makes a huge difference. Speaking of more videos, I've got another exciting one lined up for you. Just click on the next video showing right on your screen now to keep the fun going. See you there.